What I wanted to present to you is not only Edward Bowser, Edward T. Bowser Jr., but I want to present the background of his family, so it gives you an idea of the sort of social climate that we were all living in at the time. And the Bowser family is a family of great achievers. Alan Bowser went to Princeton. Wow. And Edward Bowser's daughter went to Harvard.
Was Alan the father?
No, Alan is a nephew.
Okay.
A nephew. And they all went to excellent schools, Columbia University, Bowser's daughter Cecile. So, you know, when you're living in our sort of bubble of Essex County and you think everything is so sort of without racism, whatever. This is a very important family politically who are very big achievers. So that's all we ever really saw, in my sort of milieu. But then you see things like Bowser didn't really get his license immediately. In fact, his brother, the mayor, in his narrative says that he was flunked twice because there were no black architects in New Jersey in the 40s at that point. And it's very surprising to see that Edward Bowser Sr. got his license after his son.
I see.
And what I want to show to you is Edward Bowser Jr.'s formation in the Le Corbusier studio. And this is something that has just come out. And I have to thank Glenn Mariconda, who is possibly with us on the Zoom. And it would be great if he'd like to give some words later on. He was able to unearth in the Le Corbusier Foundation a lot of documents. And this has been for the first time because we've been looking for them for decades.
Fondation Le Corbusier, you can make an appointment and go there and look in the documents. I got it myself. Never kept it. Was he the only black member of the Atelier of Corbusier?
I'm not sure, but I would think so.
From what I can tell, he was.
Right. I know he's the first or possibly the only American to work with Le Corbusier. And this was in 1949 and 1950. And then Edward Bowser and his wife, Carmen, stayed on to do other works. But I'm going to read, because this is very important history, and you can all contact me another time, but this is a Zoom recording, and I want to read for the record this very important material, because it's important American history. So Edward Theodore Bowser Jr., 1924 to 1995. Bowser graduated from East Orange High School in East Orange, New Jersey, a straight-A student. After attending Howard University in Washington for a year, he changed to RPI in New York and graduated in both architecture and civil engineering. He served in the Navy during World War II and coming out got a degree in marine engineering from Purdue. Then he did a fellowship with Le Corbusier in France. His first child, Catherine, was born there in November 1950. And that's amazing when you think, Mrs. Bowser was there, without any family members and pregnant and giving birth.
And James Baldwin went to Paris eventually. Yes, and they may have even known each other.
Possibly. Well, Bowser stayed in Europe working on a reconstruction project, returning around 1952 to East Orange, New Jersey. And they would not test him for his architectural license. So he took the national exam and he got top grade in the country. After that, New Jersey relented and he established his own practice. He designed the headquarters of the Ronson firm and a ShopRite store. Bowser's father, Edward Sr., was an architectural draftsman and got his license after Edward did. Bowser Jr. became a champion of affordable housing. He was a private pilot Then he had a second career in Ghana, Africa, initially as part of the, according to his brother Robert Bowser, who was the mayor of East Orange, he and his wife fixed up buildings, made dorms and classrooms, this is in Ghana, and a solar-powered fish hatchery. Eventually, they had over 300 students. About half of them went to college. He became friends with the president of Ghana, Colonel Rawlings, who eventually closed, who was also a pilot. And together they made a plane from spare parts they found in the jungle. He stayed in Ghana for about 19 years and died there of cerebral malaria in 1995. His wife Carmen remained in Ghana, and the school eventually closed after a few years. They had 3 children, Catherine, Ed, and Cecile. And that's from the US Modernist website. So this is his sort of curriculum that he had when, sort of like an outline of his biography.
CV.
This is from the Corbusier Foundation. It's what he used to go to work there, and we see that he received several awards, and he went to, he had a bachelor degree from Rensselaer Polytechnic. In 1948, he had military service, and his hobbies included photography, boating, model railroads, and astronomy. And he served as an assistant scoutmaster. Here's a lovely picture of Edward Bowser, Carmen Villette Bowser, and their daughter Catherine, who was born in Ghana. And Mrs. Bowser actually stayed on to continue their work and was aided by their daughter Cecile, and I'm sure other family members. Architect Edward Bowser Jr. of East Orange. He was one of the few Americans to work in the Paris studio of the visionary architect Le Corbusier. According to the architect's brother, the late Robert Bowser, former mayor of East Orange, Edward Bowser Jr. graduated from East Orange High School and then began his college studies at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I believe that's where his dad went. He left at his freshman year and went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in architecture and civil engineering at the same time. He went into the Navy and got another bachelor's degree in marine engineering from Purdue. As a result of that, he did a fellowship with Le Corbusier and worked with him for about 2 or 3 years in France. Actually, he worked for a year in the studio, and he stayed on in France to continue working on projects after that. So he was in France for about 3 years. When he completed his internship, he stayed in Europe, this was after World War II, to help design the reconstruction in many of the towns over there. Edward Bowser Jr. and his wife went to live in Ghana, where they founded a school for design and computers. Bowser designed the first solar-powered chicken hatcheries in Africa. Here's some pictures. So, I mean, the Bowser family have always been a family with outstanding education and sort of a very gentlemanly demeanor. So in a climate where there was maybe some difficulty, I'm sure that they were just too gentlemanly to sort of force themselves or show their achievements, sort of put them in your face because they were gentlemen. And ladies, so possibly they didn't have to, because in our community they were leaders. This is Robert Bowser, and as a child, and Edward Bowser on the left. Oh, I'm sorry. So, Edward Bowser Sr., the architect's father, was born in 1901 and was a lifelong resident of East Orange who participated in community affairs and was the first African-American chairman of the City Board of Adjustment. He was a member of the East Orange Planning Board, the Advisory Committee for the East Orange Golf Course, and the East Orange Parking Authority. He served on the Committee of Management for the YMCA, was chairman of the Salvation Army Board, East Orange Police Commissioner, and was an advisor to the Youth Church Council. And then his son, Mayor Bowser, held the distinction of being the first African-American in the history of the city to have been elected to serve a third term, serving 4 terms in total from 1998 to 2014. He began his professional career as a city planner for the Newark Central Planning Board and traffic engineer for the township of Montclair. This is the mayor, the son of prior to becoming mayor, he served for the Newark Board of Education as a school district principal engineer in the design and construction department. There is an Edward T. Bowser School of Excellence in East Orange. It's a grammar school that bears his name. Some more photographs. That's Mrs. Bowser, is Edward Bowser Sr.'s wife, and the 3 Bowser children, I believe. Edward, no, the grandchildren, I'm sorry. These are the grandchildren. So they're Catherine, Ed, and Cecile. I'm very sorry that.
Is there a problem with the, I don't know. No, there it is.
Here's some more Bowser family. So in the private school that I went to in Montclair, Montclair Academy, Montclair Community Academy, there are Bowser students from the Bowser family from school. So Luther Arthur Bowser, I'm sorry. Lucius Arthur Bowser, son of Edward T. Bowser Jr., a senior, and Louise Patman, that was the mother's maiden name. Growing up in East Orange, he was a 1945 graduate of East Orange High School. Lucius attended Rutgers University School of Pharmacy in Newark, New Jersey. He opened Bowser's Pharmacy in Elizabeth, New Jersey in 1958 and subsequently served in the office of the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey until his retirement. In 1982, he received a Master's of Public Health from Columbia University School of Public Health, which is remarkable, later on in life for a gentleman to do all that work. He founded the Historical Society of East Orange in 1990 and served as its first president. He was a member of the New Jersey and the national chapters of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, which is an organization that I belong to as well. And then Alan Bowser, who is in the photograph here. He's the third from the left. Son of Lucius, is a graduate of Princeton, Johns Hopkins, and Georgetown University Law Center. He has an extensive professional experience as an attorney, economist, and senior executive in the public and private sectors. Currently, he is a consultant and an attorney in private practice. So I just wanted you to understand the educational background that Edward T. Bowser Jr.'s, family, who are just sort of leaders in our Essex County community. And, it's remarkable when you kind of think that there might be oppression or there might be bias, and I'm sure that they could tell you very well. But also another family in Montclair that I grew up with, the Darden family, Norma Jean and Carol Darden, who are now in their 80s, used to leave their family's estate. Their father was a medical doctor, and he was a physician for the Cotton Club in New York. So they used to host the Duke Ellington band to stay on their estate so that they wouldn't be mistreated in five-star hotels in New York City. And Mary McLeod Bethune lived at their house so that she could sell all of her real estate to found her college. And Norma Sampson, Mrs. Darden's sister, was one of the co-founders. But they would always tell me, well, Frank, we used to go to Florida by train, and when you were crossing the Mason-Dixon line, you'd have to get up and go to the back of the train.
So the racism became sharp.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't even imagine, because growing up in Montclair, you just see a beautiful estate, and you have your nice Porsche, and
it's amazing. So it's exceptional, this part of New Jersey, in the United States at that time.
Well, that's why I think we grew up in a bubble, because I didn't learn about how racist America was actually until.
So New York City had a lot more racism than often than where you grew up.
Well, our community was like a bubble, and Montclair is considered very diverse, and it is. However, it's very segregated, and people like to stay by themselves. The white people stay by themselves, and the black people like to stay by themselves. There's a very long-standing, very, I would say, well-to-do black middle class in Montclair, and that the first black homeowner in Montclair was in 1836.
So there is the reality of segregation, even though there's less, in a funny way, violent racism as there was in the South. It's complex.
It's more of a choice.
Self-segregation.
Yeah. I think East Orange became a very successful, predominantly black city. I think the Bowser family had a lot to do with it. The generational. Now, this is an amazing photograph, which I cannot see without my glasses, but all the way to the right, and Glenn Mariconda found this, and I bless him for finding all of these documents for the Le Corbusier Foundation. Here's a photograph of the Le Corbusier studio. You see Monsieur Le Corbusier standing sort of in the middle. And then way to the right of the photograph, with his back to us, is Edward T. Bowser Jr.
For everybody's knowledge, this is 35 Rue de Sèvres, Paris.
Yes.
And see the mural in the back?
Yes.
He always painted as well as acted as an architect and the head of the atelier in New York. He said painting is what he did in the morning, and then in the afternoon he went into the atelier.
And I'm going to show you something that it's students drew this for Monsieur Le Corbusier. It's a little present. This is his.
So afterwards we could turn on the light and
right.
Look at it. Okay,
right.
That's a Xerox.
Yeah,
of the original.
Right. It was like a long drawing. It's like a costume for a ballantet.
And it's also almost like an Asian scroll. It like goes down.
Right, and it's signed by all of the studio members. And it was for Mr. Le Corbusier for Christmas.
Amazing.
It was a costume caricature for him. So these are all the documents. Edward Bowser in this document is requesting to Monsieur Le Corbusier if he can go to do a stage in his studio, and
when the cathedrals were white, 1936, he wrote that.
Right.
And that is an extraordinary testimony of Corb in America.
And apparently one of Edward's professors at Rensselaer Polytechnic was an acquaintance of Mr. Le Corbusier and was instrumental in making the connection. But Mayor Bowser would always tell me, because I've known the Bowser family for years and had no idea that I was actually purchasing a Bowser house until after I closed on it, which is quite embarrassing.
We'll be seeing some images of
Yeah, Mayor Bowser would always say to me, "You remind me so much of my brother Edward, because he was an architect, and like you, because I went to work in Italy for Aldo Rossi." And he said, "And my brother went to work in Europe for a famous architect too."
yeah.
So I was like, "Oh, really?"
Well, that's not bad.
I know. And he told me that like years ago, like decade, like a long time ago. And I never dreamed that I would be living in a Bowser house someday. But what's so important about this material is that you were seeing it for the first time. Nobody's seen these letters. They have just been unearthed. So this is important in American history.
And these photographs too.
Yes, that an American goes to work for Le Corbusier. So this is I've translated them. We'll move on to see the translations, but this is sort of recommending.
This is a letter of recommendation.
It's a letter of recommendation from the professor at Rensselaer for Edward Bowser.
Written in French.
So I've attempted, if you can sort of read these. The one on the right says, Monsieur Le Corbusier, 35 Rue de Mr. Commissioner of the Police of Notre Dame, dear Mr. Commissioner, I know Mr. Edward Bowser and his wife Carmen Bowser, née Villette from New Jersey. Here with me, I guarantee him for the duration of 1 year what is necessary for the completion of his education. Amazing. My most sincere, distinct wishes, Le Corbusier. How do you like that? And this is a message from Edward Bowser to Le Corbusier in English. Dear Monsieur Le Corbusier, I am sailing from New York on the 25th of April on the New Amsterdam, which will arrive in France on May 2nd, 1949. I hope to be in Paris on the 3rd, but I would like a week to get oriented to Paris, learn my way around, pick up some French language, etc. If it is satisfactory, then I will commence work on the 9th of May in your office. Here's wishing our association for the next year will be a pleasant one, Edward T. Bowser Jr. So, I mean, you understand what a genteel education that Edward Bowser and the Bowsers had.
This is hard to read.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't read it. But the next one is clear.
Well, it's also hard to read, a little bit clearer.
If you'd like to contact me about these, please do, because I don't want to stumble over them.
Well, it does show the exchange is very polite and very solid.
And this is written to Bowser in East Orange. And it's sort of, it's explaining to him when he's going to begin and that it's not retributed. So he wasn't being paid. It was
for learning purposes.
Yes, that's what I'm seeing.
You know, at this time, he was friendly with another New Jerseyite, or he was around this time, named Albert Einstein.
Yes.
And there's these famous photographs at exactly this period. He would come in and they would have these kind of press releases.
I mean, I went to Cooper Union and studied with John Haydick, and we did a lot of research about Le Corbusier. I wish that I'd known this then.
But this is the nature of both the racism that we are overcoming now and the logic of discovery of scholarship. And that's why I'm teaching this course.
Yes, this is
Because knowledge, whether racism or oppression is involved or not, involves finding out things that you didn't know.
This is an important moment in discovery of scholarship.
Absolutely.
And I'm so happy to share them with you because nobody's really seen them.
Well, hopefully you'll publish a book about this.
I hope so. And maybe with Glenn Maraconda we'll be doing this. So this is just more of an exchange of very polite letters. Nous avons noté la date de la
Frank, I don't mean to be inappropriate, but I'm just dying, and I'm sure the class is too, to see your house.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying you should go over anything you don't think is, I mean, that you should.
No, okay, so this is an exchange, and then this is very interesting because it's sort of like, it's this sort of, if you look at these images, look at these images and you'll see this is the costume that was for Le Corbusier for, this was his Christmas gift.
Very surrealistic. Now
Yeah.
I see the method in your approach.
And you know the Le Corbusier means the bird-like one.
Well, it means, I was reading his letters to his mother in 1911, and I know the origin of that, and I'll tell you that later. It's not just the bird-like one, it's a very complex thing that involves Friedrich Nietzsche, his ancestor.
I see.
And a crow.
So this is 1949, and that whole drawing was Kerbu, and you'll see Edward Bowser's signature.
This stuff is incredible.
And then all of the other people from the studio that signed. So that, I mean, this could be a whole thesis to
This is incredible.
research every single name of this person.
You have to show this to Ken Frampton, who just,
So this is the letter of recommendation. I, the undersigned, certify that Edward T. Bowser, of American nationality, has worked in my studio as an apprentice from May 1949 to this day. He has worked with much precision and seriousness, quite particularly while working on L'unité d'habitation de Marseille. I wish him excellent success in his career. Paris, May 22nd, 1950, Le Corbusier. Isn't this amazing?
I see now why you're doing this very careful philological research. I was just so eager to look at the architecture.
Right. No, but it's important. This is important American history. It's important international
world history.
It's international architectural history.
It is.
That has not found its place yet.
This is amazing.
And I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of the documentation of Edward T. Bowser's work. So I'm just going to breeze through these drawings of the L'unité d'habitation de Marseille that Edward T. Bowser Jr. has worked on. We don't know, I mean, he doesn't sign them, but you know, it's a collaboration. But I believe that, as Mr. Le Corbusier pointed out, he worked particularly on this project. And I'm particularly happy just to show them to you because it gives you an idea of the, you know, the atmosphere of the time and the creativity.
That's extraordinary.
Isn't it?
Oh my God, let me take a picture of that. That is gorgeous. Never seen an architectural drawing of that kind.
And I'm happy to share my PowerPoint with any of you because I really want this. I want you to learn more than I have.
We have to show this material to Princeton University Press. And that would be.
This is
they go crazy.
Important architectural history that I believe must find its place. So I'm going to get to the houses. And I do want to thank the U.S. modernist, George Sharp, who contacted me through Catherine Bowser.
It's extraordinary what you have.
Now these are the interiors. You'll see the interiors of the Maraconda House in Nutley, New Jersey. That's sort of much nicer than this, but the same design.
That's typologically derived not only from the ideas of collective living, but also from workman's, proletarian, Parisian, cafes that had two levels. There was a cafe on the downstairs level, and then there was Frampton writes about this. You can find them in Montparnasse and places like this. That you had a cafe on the downstairs level, and then there was like some storage area on top that sometimes the employees would sleep in. And this became a prefabricated collective living that he derived from his proletarian neighborhood.
That's very interesting.
It's extremely interesting.
It's very humane.
Yes, and also it became as it were, a default mode of family living. Because originally it was a public. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah. And also Jean-Louis Cohen has written about it from another angle, including the idea, as you were talking about, the ship, the nautical. So it's almost like a stateroom in a ship, but have two levels.
Well, it reminds me of the Bellatoio,
Yes.
Aldo Rossi's concept, where we would say that.
Yes. Tell everyone what that is, because they've been.
The Bellatoio. I said, what is a Bellatoio? It's like a balcony. He said, Bellatoio. The word comes from ballare, meaning to dance. He says it's where the children would dance after dinner.
And it's a kind of
Dance
loggia
play.
in Italy. And this is all very popular. This modernism goes, it percolates up. And then there's this other thing, and I'm going to keep quiet, I'm going to try, but this stuff is relevant, is that Guido Canella invited me, this was a few years before he died, he was very close to Aldo Rossi, and he met him.
Yes, of course.
Yes, and Guido Canella was very left-wing, Euro-communist. He got Aldo Rossi, if I'm not wrong, he was connected to those communist networks of municipal leaders and real estate, left-wing real estate people, to do Galartese with Imanino.
Yes.
And then I gave a lecture, my first lecture on Aldo Rossi, and Guido Canella was there. And I said, I'm sorry, but I really think Galartese has something to do with Corbusier's housing, with the Corbusier Marseille, not in the typological sense, it's totally new, but those long volumes, those ship-like volumes, in the base with those, I'm talking about Aldo Rossi's work, not Imanino's work, the whiteness of it, and the those pilotis-like piers. And in a certain way, I said, there's a ghost of Corbusier in Rossi. And Canella said, yes. He was interested in in Corbusier, Rossi, but it's very, very distant. It's very remote. It's very mediated. And he always held Corbusier highly, didn't he, Rossi?
Yes. Yes, he did. He didn't.
But it's not an obvious thing. If you look at Galartese and you look at the Marseille block, they're very different. But both of them are utopian reformist housing. Both of them are.
Absolutely.
But it's a very complex issue, this.
Please forgive me if I.
No, go ahead.
I just want to read this into my conversation, sort of like reading it into the record, because it's very important that you know this and that we save this and document this information. And these are Edward Bowser Jr.'s three siblings, Edward Bowser Jr. and Carmen Villette Bowser's three siblings. So the daughter that you saw as a baby, born in Paris, Catherine Bowser, is a graduate of Harvard University, formerly with the Communications Department of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and currently is the director of Catherine Bowser Graphic Design. The late Edward Theodore Bowser III held a variety of managerial and accounting positions in the construction industry, including assignments in Bowser Engineers Incorporated. Edward Bowser was a much sought after political consultant and community organizer. He is the grandson of Edward T. Bowser Sr., a member of the New Jersey General Assembly and East Orange City Council, and nephew of Mayor Robert L. Bowser, former mayor of the city of East Orange. Cecile Bowser began at Brown University, daughter, went to Rockefeller Institute moved to California with a principal investigator doing malaria research and managing a specialized primate colony, doing breeding management, and then to Agururon Pharmaceuticals, where she also worked with design and management of animal resource facility. Her company successfully launched an HIV/AIDS protease inhibitor.
Amazing.
She then spent years supporting her mother, Carmen Bowser, on annual trips to Ghana, where she helped establish a computer school, which she and Edward Bowser worked at once. They built a secondary school for the township they lived in Ghana. Cecile's current projects are in farming ventures in Ghana and the prospects of sericulture, silk farming, through colony management of industrial scale silkworm production, and that's in Africa. But also in the presentation, and I don't want to go back too much, it talks about the Bowser family having been in East Orange since the 1800s. So I just wanted to go on to the houses now, but I wanted you all to understand the importance of the preparation and the education of the Bowser. So I'm sorry I kind of messed up with the order of things. Now we're going to go back to the houses. So after, as we know, Bowser went back in 1952 to the United States after working. And oh, and I like this style. You'll see it in some of the houses. So this is, I believe, the first two houses that Bowser did in New Jersey.
It's about 53, 54.
Yes, exactly. So he was sitting in the kitchen with his mother one day, and he said there's he had just gotten back from Europe. He said there was a competition to design the Remington, the Ronson lighter company. And his mother said, well, do it. I mean, you're never going to win it if you don't do it. And he did win it. He did it and he won it. And that was his first work, and as the U.S. modernist pointed out. And then he did these two houses, the Mariconda house is the house on the left, that Glenn Mariconda, who I've been speaking about, who found all the Lucian material. And then the other house on the right. Now, my house was two houses as well, but much farther apart, but they did sort of have like a dialogue with each other.
Around 1948, I believe, Oscar Stoneroff and Louis Kahn. One of the earliest things that Louis Kahn ever built were houses that were very similar to this on the main line outside of Philadelphia. They had a very similar look.
But what I find remarkable about these houses is the quality of the architectural design.
Absolutely.
It's not really contaminated by any kind of bourgeois or suburban New Jersey vernacular sort of comfiness. That is brilliant. That's like a lantern that you're looking at.
It's very forward looking.
It's very forward looking. This is a screened-in veranda overlooking the Manhattan skyline. That's about 10 miles away. So, you're at the top of the hill and you're overlooking the skyline. And the house brilliantly has these sort of like engineering features, like there are braces that you can deploy if there's a windstorm or hurricane so that the glass panels don't blow out.
Are the supports, in your opinion, like the pilotis of Corbusier?
Yes. Unfortunately, this is the second house, and it's been modified and converted into a closed garage with farm-like garage doors.
But they're not obviously derived from Corbu's quote-unquote styles.
No.
They're very original, but they have elements engineering-wise that are related to Corbu in the sense of the pilotis, but they're not as obvious.
Now, these are are the first houses by Edward T. Bowser Jr. When he returned to the United States. My house is in 1956, and you'll see how different my house is. And then there's other houses in Montclair that are still different. But I find these they're very strong and metaphysical. Since then, the neighborhood has evolved and become a suburban, subdivision of ranch houses.
The treatment of the roof is really beautiful. Because it's a float on the right-hand side.
They're addressing the view, the panorama.
But they're open up, and I'm tempted to say there's something which he would not necessarily have known of Gioponti, which is later. Oh, I'm just saying a parallel with, if you go back, that on the right has something, that opening up of the volume by what you call the view. It's a little bit like the Villa Planchard, which is a very Corbusian work of Ponti, but he opens up the elements of the house so as to create a kind of spatial dialogue between them. They seem to be a kind of ideal explosion, very metaphysical. And then color is kind of pulsing out of them at night because of the light, colored light.
Well, also, this has this very Gestalt sort of relationship in the way that they're both sided.
Yes.
Because you feel that there's like a tension. Even you understand it more in these photographs because you don't really see it today in the suburban context.
Not at all.
There are houses across the street,
and they're crudely done, a lot of this.
Well, they're not crude houses. I wouldn't.
No, I don't mean that. I meant the siding. Because the siding, as you point out here, is very, very intelligent.
Oh, it's very intelligent because they're really addressing the panorama. There's a very strong energy that you can see.
But look at the Oscar Stanaroff social housing with the young Louis Kahn. There's some real parallels with the materiality. And it's avoidance of suburban cliches.
Right, yeah. That's what they told us when I started Cooper Union. They said, everything you like about architecture that you've liked until now, you're gonna have to forget about it. Because I came from Montclair where we had beautiful English Tudor houses. It's sort of like Princeton. And I thought, oh, I want to design those. And they told me, no, forget about it.
Your acquaintance or friend, Peter Eisenman, when he comes to Princeton, he gave a talk.
I love Peter.
You know what Peter said?
What?
He gestured towards the neo-Gothic through the windows. He said, "Look at this crap." Don't look at this.
I love it. And that's why I wanted to be an architect, because I thought it was so elegant.
No, but Peter has to, no, actually, excuse me, I made a mistake. When he did that, he was in my, I was in his class, that's right, he wasn't in mine. I got confused. I was at Yale. He said it happens at Princeton too, but look at this neo-Gothic nonsense, this crap outside of the windows. That's what he said.
So this is the Glenn and Asaka Mariconda house in Nutley, New Jersey today. And you see how, the neighborhood evolved around it and it was subdivided, and you have some very nice plantings like everyone else. This is New Jersey. Except like in my house,
do you think there's an element of looking at the Ames? Or Eames, how do you pronounce that?
I always say Ames.
Do you think there's something? Or do you think that's irrelevant?
No, a little bit. Well, they're all kind of analogous.
No, but what I mean is the lightness and the boldness. There's a real bold, this architect is really, really, really talented.
Very Breuer.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's more Breuer than Ames.
Yeah, it's sort of
The
Breuer.
way that it grounds itself.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's the reason why I mentioned Ames was those. It's not even the screens. It's
more articulated. And then you're looking at a house now that, for example, the screened-in porch when Bowser first designed it was like a lantern. It was like this metaphysical, veil, lantern.
But I wouldn't say anything, even though there's cantilever. It's maybe a hint of right, but I think it's much more Breuer.
Well, just let me continue. Sorry. Now there's mullions. Now there's a structure in the screens because of all of the, from the panorama, you have a lot of winds and hurricanes. But I think that Breuer houses are a little more, because this is articulated, there's something more sweeter about it. Breuer did a house for friends of mine in Manilokin, McMullen House. That really looked like a refrigerator.
But don't you think, but don't you think I think Ames is not the right reference, but I think there is a hint of Frankfurt Rhine. I really do, in the Usonian houses.
Even in my house.
The Usonian house.
The Usonian houses, because these are Usonian houses. And it comes at a time, my house is a 9 square grid house. I don't know if Bowser did any other 9 square grid houses. These are not. I think the East Orange General Hospital is definitely a 9 square grid project or a grid project.
Did you know Robert Bowser? Did you?
The mayor?
No, Robert, the architect.
No, he died in Ghana in 1995.
Oh, that's right. But I thought
my mother knew him.
But I thought maybe you could have met him because he came back when you were a boy or something.
No. Basically, when I was in Italy.
You were in Rossi land. Yeah.
I knew his brother.
I see.
The mayor.
The only reason I asked that is because I wanted to know if you ever conversed with him about.
Oh, I wish I could, but I think he's still in my house in spirit.
Okay.
But Hamilton Bowser, who was the other brother, who was an engineer and he owned a construction company, the family construction company and engineering firm. His children went to Montclair Academy like me. He actually built the frames for the artist Don Miller. Don Miller did the Martin Luther King Freedom Mural in the National Library in Washington, and he did it in Montclair, and it was filmed by another neighbor from Montclair who was Gil Noble, who had a show called Like It Is. And that was an amazing moment in history where, with the backdrop of the mural that was done in a studio in Montclair, Gil Noble spoke with a lot of people that were in the Freedom Mural. You know, like Abernathy. Right. It was amazing. So we have this cultural legacy that's almost like not publicized.
Sub Rosa.
Right. This is the Mariconda House. The Mariconda House has an amazing collection of Le Corbusier furniture. Unlike my house, that's all Louis XVI, because it's what my mother had.
Did he design furniture and objects of daily use? Was he a designer of that kind?
These come from Marseille.
No, I'm talking about Bowser. Did he design furniture and objects of daily use?
I don't. Well, he had a trademark, the details.
Yes, I could see.
Lots of built-ins. And if we look at these photographs, that was his style. Mm-hmm. Those are the original, that's the original style of his interiors. But you have to understand there are cork floors and wood paneling and wooden ceilings, so you really didn't need much. I mean, you see in the Mariconda house, well, that's actually a wooden floor. My floors are either cork or slate or linoleum.
You know, some of it reminds me of California modernism, like Schindler a little bit.
It does.
There's a kind of Schindler feel with the wood and the Schindler had more of horizontals than verticals.
And the Usonian houses are usually darker.
Yes.
See, my house is built in the middle of a forest into a brook bed, so it's like lined to the street. It's all covered with ivy. That's why you really can't really understand the architecture too well, because
so it's a kind of low version of falling water in a certain way.
It's flowing water.
Flowing water, yeah.
So these are all Bowser original things. Now this is a housing project that Bowser did in East Orange. You know, don't forget his father. They were planners and engineers. So Edward was the architect of the group, I guess, along with his father, who was instrumental in the planning of the Parkway and Route 280. But this is a sort of low-income housing, and it's called I'll tell you the name. I'm sorry, it's a name in African that I'll be able to type. But they're called beautiful houses.
It's pretty high quality.
Yeah, and that's
There is a Breuer thing going on here too.
and they're still there today.
There's something almost Kantian about it.
It's very European from New Jersey.
Yeah, but there's something almost Louis Kahn, you know?
I mean, I would agree with you about the
Yes.
Could somebody do me a favor and read? Oh wait, it's not there. I wish I could see.
But the sighting of it, the way it has that like sawtooth quality in the site, it's very interesting.
It's interesting, and it's very village-like.
Yes. And I am almost tempted to say there's parallels with Scandinavian modernism. If you look at Arne Jacobsen, Danish, and the Swedes.
I mean, it's very elegant for its time. I don't know how well it aged.
That happens.
Yeah, it's still there, and I don't think anyone really can understand the architectural genius behind it.
Well, it's very different than Corbusian collective housing. It's more, it has something of its own, and it is somewhat like Scandinavian.
This is a house in Montclair, Upper Montclair, that's been there all my life. I passed it a million times. I never knew it was a Bowser.
Very neutral.
It's a lot like the plan of the Mariponda house, where it's very articulated. This facade overlooks sort of New York City, so it's very plain. This is an unusual house with a very articulated roof composition, and it's been painted over. It was possibly like my house, and that was just sort of dark cedar shakes, dark cedar planks covered with ivy. This is a house that Mayor Bowser gave me the location, and I would think that it's by Edward Bowser, but I'm not quite sure. I think it is. It sort of has a Brady Bunch sort of character to it that makes me wonder. Oh, I'm just showing you this leading up to my house. This is by Richard Meyer, and it's a house that he doesn't really like. Well, he doesn't talk a lot about. And it's the first house he did. It's the house he did for his parents in 1962.
I think it's better than his later work.
And it's in my neighborhood in Essex Fells. Now, this neighborhood, Essex Fells is a golf community near Montclair, and it's very, very country-like. And in the late 50s, when my house was built, there was a community of cousins from a synagogue in Newark. Among them were Richard Meyer and his cousin Peter Eiserman.
Right, which he often points out, yes.
Yeah, he told me that. I was shocked when we were in Venice staying in a hotel all together for the Biennale. He said, to Richard Meyer walked in the room, he said, "I'd like you to meet Frank. He's from Montclair. Let's see how long he'll last at Cooper Union." And then he said, "Frank, this is my cousin, Richard." And I said, "Yes, we're cousins."
Yeah, well, and I had dinner with Meyer because I had a very close friend who was a student of mine who then graduated and became part of the office. And so I was seated suddenly across from Meyer before the scandal, well before the scandal. And I said, "Is it true that you are Peter Eisenman's cousin?" He said, "No, young man, he is my cousin."
That's hilarious.
He is my cousin. I'm the guy that he's the cousin, not the other way around.
There's also that other anecdote that I'm not going to mention.
Okay. You'll tell me later.
All right.
Yeah.
No, it's really fun. I don't want it to go on record. But anyway, one of the reasons why Peter Eisenman doesn't like to, not Peter Eisenman, Richard Meyer doesn't like to talk about his family's house is because he had originally wanted it to be on pilotis.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Diane told me this.
He wanted more Corbusier.
He wanted it to look like, Villa Garge or
Villa Savoie.
Savoie or something like that. He had this whole vision, and this is right across the street from our country club, Essex Fells. I'm sure that, people wouldn't have never understood. At least it's sort of like a ranch house like this.
It's not bad at all. I like that turret.
Oh, it has a gorgeous inside. And the people, it just sold for the third time, and I'm very happy to tell you that the interior is absolutely gorgeous. It has the only furniture that are really built-ins and new are like Saarinen furniture. It's really nice. So I'm going to tell you the funny little story about my house.
What in God's name is this?
Now, I was living with my mother. Actually, I was living in Italy for 25 years. So I came home to be with my mother and my grandmother. My mother and I decided to buy a house together in Montclair or someplace so that we could live together and spend less money, which in Montclair is difficult. So I found a house in Essex Fells, but it just looked like a contemporary house from the 70s, covered with ivy. So I just want to tell you that when I was in my senior year at Montclair Academy in high school, I was about 16 years old, I did this painting of an aviary. And then in my senior year, so that's a painting I did of an aviary. And I took it from Architectural Digest. I think it was someplace in England. It was a garden colony.
I see.
But I was 16 when I did that, so. And then on the left, you'll see my thesis project at Cooper Union. And what it was a property in Montclair with the road on the top, and the property descends from the road. And I built a structure that was a 9-square grid structure where you could plug in rooms of existing houses that you liked.
How funny.
So that was my thesis project.
Was that for John Hayden?
Yeah, he kind of liked it. Slutsky hated it. Ryman Abraham hated it. They all hated it.
But Hayek liked the playful quality.
Yeah, he thought it was kind of cool.
Actually, there is something weirdly, I could see how it would appeal to Hayek.
And then the bird in the middle. And that bird is from my house, because actually these two pieces, that painting and my project for my thesis, are premonitions. Because I had no idea that the house that I was buying and closing on the day of the closing with my mother in the attorney's office was a house by Edward Bowser, and I had no idea that it was a 9-square grid house. I'm so embarrassed to say that until a week later when I moved in and I composing the furniture.
How much longer after you made that did Aldo Rossi come and become your teacher at Cooper?
Oh, he was my teacher at Cooper a year before that.
Oh,
Or 2 years before that, and then I took a year off to go work for him, finished my thesis, and then went back for 24 years. Now, the house the aviary on the right is a premonition of the house because that is the site of the house. It's the exact site. There's an 80-acre forest in the back. The property was a mill pond, so it's sort of like a meadow.
yeah.
And you'll see. So this is very useful if somehow I'd like to distribute this. This is John Haydick's notes on the 9-square grid.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I learned when I went to Cooper Union.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very interesting learning tools that we used when we were at Cooper Union, and we were learning about the Bauhaus and Le Corbusier, and
So it's also related to Vitkover's analyses of Palladio.
yes. Now, John Haydick instilled in us that along with the 9-square grid, there was poetry and art. and metaphysics. It's just not about moving around panels and volumes in this field of 9 squares. And John Hayek loved poetry. So I think that when Edward Bowser went to this site for the first time to design my house and the other house, that unfortunately later became a Dutch colonial, I think that Edward Bowser could have been, I'm sure he would have known these 2 poems. One is from Le Corbusier's office.
Right.
Where it says, like a woman and like a man, the river is made of what it receives, its sources, its tributaries, and its runoffs. It is with them that it creates its shape, and then it takes them to the sea.
Wow, beautiful.
And I believe he was very inspired when he got to the site to see that he could build a house right on this waterway. And then I'm sure that Edward T. Bowser Jr. had the privilege of going to the Black YMCA to hear Langston Hughes when he spoke, when he was a child. So I love this poem. I've known rivers, by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers ancient as the world, and older than the flow of human blood in waves. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathe in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusty rivers. My soul has grown deep like rivers.
Zlata gave a talk that dealt with water, Japanese tea houses, and I read an early monograph on Frank Lloyd Wright comparing falling water to a Japanese tea house writ large.
Oh, yes.
So this is an ancient theme.
Mm-hmm.
When they speak about the Euphrates, I don't like the concept of world culture, but there are parallels. Globalization, world, it's too vague, but some of the earliest habitations ever on the Euphrates are river houses. And the Japanese tea ceremony occurs over a stream.
And I believe Edward Bowser was so impressed. You know, the site was a former mill pond. It's right off of an Olmsted park.
Oh, wow.
And then it's backed up by this 80-acre forest. So he had such an opportunity to site these 2 houses, you know, for these members of this synagogue congregation who were being very brave and building their houses in Essex Fells, you know, which is a country club community.
But does it flood when there's a lot of rain?
No, my property does. So
What is a mill pond?
where there was a mill.
An old mill that would
Oh.
grind from the 18th century. Peter Eisenman lives in a mill that was converted in Connecticut because Yale University gave him an 18th century mill. And when some of his students went to his 80th birthday, they went into this 18th century mill, and one of them said, Peter hadn't seen that guy in a long time, and he said, what are you doing here? And then the student said, no, Peter, that's not the question. What are you doing here?
That's very fun. I love Peter Rose. So fun. In New Jersey, where they have brooks, the technology before the Industrial Revolution was to dam the brook and to turn it into a pond, and that was how they created the power from the water, and the water was
A good turbine.
Yeah, so my property was a mill pond. And then I wanted to read what I had written once about the 9 square grid concept. For my house, Bowser's concept for the construction is that of a 9 square grid house that Bauhaus International style architects devised as a learning tool to teach young architects the dynamics of design. Coincidentally, I was taught the 9 square grid architectural design principles as an architecture student at Cooper Union in New York. My thesis project was a 9 square grid house. I had also done a painting as a student at Montclair Academy of an aviary in a forest that looks just like my house. And its site, actually. Bowser, like his mentor, Le Corbusier, used this grid structure as a container of poetic gestures and architectural forms. The architect preserved the natural beauty of the property as a completely original wooded zero landscape. So I have no gardens I just have rocks.
Right.
A lot of raccoons.
Wabi-sabi.
No chemical products are used, or landscaping or watering is done, so the wildlife flourishes and can be enjoyed from the abundantly glazed living spaces. And I think Bowser was a genius to conceive the property like this, a zero landscape. You know, when most of my neighbors spend $3,000 like every couple of months with their landscapers, maybe at least $1,000 a month, a bigger property, $2,000 a month to have landscapers come and water everything.
But this is very similar to what the earliest talk here was Lata about the wabi-sabi, the Japanese zero edition. Raw.
The floor plans are divided into 9 squares and are supported by structural elements of beams and columns. The 9 squares are refined into living spaces with partition walls and service volumes. So, like the bathrooms and the kitchen, they're all in a service volume in my house. The house's butterfly roof and main built form are reminiscent of the Corbusian Council General Building of the United Nations in New York City, a close relative, architecturally speaking, of Felsbridge. Felsbridge is just the name that my mother and I named the house. So, see, you have, this is Edward Bowser's site plan.
This is where you live.
Yes. There's a brook on the property. So you see the road in yellow, and that's actually above the house, like my pieces. And then the brook is below. So you have this poetic circumstance of a road, civilization.
Right.
It's like a circulation axis of civilization.
Like an umbilical cord.
Yeah. But then you have another one, and that's the river, and that's the ancient one.
Right.
Pre-civilization. It's also where the Lenape walked when they
Native Americans.
Yeah. Indigenous Lenape when they were walking through. And it was also used by fugitive slaves when they were trying to get to New York through New Jersey. That was very dangerous because of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, where there were very high bounties placed on fugitives that we would capture.
So this was part of the Underground Railroad in a way?
Well, I mean,
a term.
I'm an Underground Railroad historian, so I kind of look at anything as possible. We do have a safe house very close by.
And I told you that I found out in Manhattan at the gay bar, Marie's Crisis, in the basement, there is part of the tunnel from New Jersey of the Underground Railroad.
Right, because you would have to try to get through New Jersey and not get captured.
Go into the north.
And then if you were able to get to Jersey City, you could cross the Hudson either with the tunnels that there were underneath supposedly at that time. But once you were in New York City, you were free.
That's it.
Because it was 1870 that it had been abolished.
It's the north.
Yeah. Well, New Jersey's the north, and we didn't do anything until like the 1880s.
New Jersey is the north, and yet there's this very strange.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. New York was much earlier, And New Jersey wasn't abolished until
Yes,
1865.
that's what I was going to bring up. That's what I was going to bring up. And
With the 13th Amendment, and that's sinful. And that's because New Jersey was founded as a plantation state, and all of the land,
like Maryland,
all of the land grants that were sold by Lord Berkeley and Lord Carteret were for plantations. And the Meadowlands were actually called New Barbados because all the landowners came up. English landowners had their plantations in Barbados and came up and settled in the Meadowlands.
Alexander Hamilton was from Barbados.
Right. The Meadowlands had 5,500 acres of forest that I think Hamilton was responsible for having them burned down because they were all full of slave markets from privateers, because it was illegal to do that in New York City in the port. So you could do that in New Jersey and hide it in the Meadowlands.
There is a strain of American history which identifies border states, Atlantic states, and yet this denies the fact, which is what you're bringing up, that slavery was not only in the Deep South. Slavery was in Maryland, especially on the Eastern Shore, and slavery was not in Pennsylvania because of the Quakers, but it was also extending up in the colonial times into New Jersey.
New Jersey was the last northern state to abolish slavery. They never wanted to. And the only reason why slavery was abolished was because of European indentured servants. It was easier to hire white servants. You weren't hiring them. They were people working for you for 10 years that weren't being paid.
When I started teaching at Princeton, an older person, I don't remember, said something to me like, "Oh, you're in the most northernmost southern university." There is something about it. When you go from Manhattan to New Jersey, there's a very tiny hint. You know what I'm saying, culturally? And when you go to Maryland, it's much stronger. And when you cross into Virginia, you're in the Deep South. Virginia is, even though it's north, in the South, it's very south.
Yeah, but New Jersey has, if you research it, it should have the worst reputation, worse than the South. You know, because the landowners did not want to ever let go of slavery. And because of the Fugitive Slave Act, there was such violence here. And just the fact that it was founded, Lord Berkeley and Lord Carteret would give the landowner 60 acres of free land for every enslaved person that they brought to New Jersey, so that they could jumpstart the state's economy on free slavery.
During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln had to sequester the state senate of Maryland because they were pro-slavery during the Civil War. And that's south of the Mason-Dixon line, Maryland. But it was a border state. So he had to arrest, sequester means arrest. He had to arrest the state senate because they were slavers in Maryland. And of course, Maryland surrounded most of Washington, D.C., the capital of the North.
Well, we have a lot of ugly hidden histories in New Jersey. For example, the first industry in the United States was the Schuyler copper mines. And you always have this nice story that you read in conventional history books, by the way, that are written and published from Southern publishing companies. When I was growing up, and I think I had basically the best education you could get for a boy in the United States at the time I was growing up. But we were taught that in the Schuyler copper mines, a very nice Negro slave found a rock on the Schuyler property and brought it to his master, Mr. Schuyler, and said, "Look, what's this?"
Ah,
And it was a chunk of copper.
there it is.
So, and that's how the Schuyler copper mines were founded. And Benjamin Franklin went there because they bought a turbine engine from Scotland to pump the water out of the mines. So the history books taught me and everyone else is that the nice man who was a slave, the Negro slave,
This myth, yes.
was given for his find a tailored suit.
I see. So maybe it wasn't a myth. I spoke too quickly. Maybe there's a lot of truth in this story.
No, it is. That's what and in the book that I'm writing right now, that guy from Africa comes from a place in Africa that is known for mineral mines.
Yes.
So this man was probably an engineer.
And he knew what was going on.
And he knew that this was copper, and he was going to show it.
And so they infantilized him. Yes.
Yeah, and they make him seem like, oh, isn't this pretty? It's like shiny. Let's give it to
Yeah,
the
like
master.
a kind of infantilization.
So they deny any kind of education or expertise or knowledge to the enslaved person, because, and that's what they taught me when I was growing up in the 60s. I mean, it's shameful.
This is very beautiful.
Oh,
site.
thank you. I did this
Very
Let's get
beautiful.
back to Edward
So you did which drawing? All of
Well,
them?
I did all of them. I took the house. I took the footprint of the house.
So it's a survey drawing.
Yeah, it's a survey of the house. I put in the 9 squares, and John Haydock told us that a 9-square grid house can also be a rectangle.
Yes, of course.
And then the middle image shows the 9-square grid, and then the right shows the floor plan.
Are there original drawings by Bowser?
Yes. Yes, they're fabulous. I'm sorry, you can see them on a site called Fellsbridge 249 Runnymede Road.
Okay.
Or you can contact me. I have all the original drawings for the house. Because the day after the closing, the building department of Essex Fells, the very nice woman who was from East Orange, and originally from the islands, and she thought it was so interesting that I knew Mayor Bowser. And I said, please try to find who designed my house. And she called me, she was so excited. She said, I found the drawings. And I said, well, tell me who the architect is. And she said, wait a minute, I'll look. And she started screaming. She said, Edward Bowser.
That's amazing.
So I think there's something very metaphysical about this house. This is the top floor. That's the ground floor. And you see the sort of square on the lower right. That was a void. The owners before me had it glazed, but that was supposed to be basically the road is at the top, and you have this facade that you penetrate with one door at the top. You cross over a bridge, and you go to this. I'll show you. You see the entry door?
Yes.
And then the house is sort of blind to the street, and then it opens up to nature.
Right.
And that's the sort of that's the dynamics of the 9-square grid. Is the house begins to just flow into the brook.
Did you know that the first house that Palladio ever designed, which was for Gian Giorgio Trissino, his teacher, has a similar plan. It has a 9-square grid, and it's open on the back. It's the first Palladian house. Very similar to this. Because I taught Palladio for many years, and it's extraordinary how similar this is.
So what I can tell you is, having had this education from John Haydock in the 9-square grid, is that this house definitely has a partie.
Oh yeah.
And Diane Lewis even noticed it, is that the house, the structures sort of like give way and flow into the brook, which is very poetic.
So Diane went there.
Oh, several times. She
Yeah.
loved it. She said she loved the design. So you see that there's a center core, and that's the volume where all of the bathrooms and kitchen is on the top floor. And then the spaces are divided with partitions around it. There is a bathroom going towards the brook, because everything in this house sort of the design flows towards the brook. This is what a mill pond is, actually. My property before they took the dams away was just a pond. This is from the 1800s. And then it became a natural, that's a water gate, how they used to like dam the brooks.
How far is it from Princeton?
I'm about an hour away. Montclair is 40 minutes. No, it's a half hour west of Manhattan.
So it's northwest of here. Is it northeast?
It's directly north. No, it's northeast.
It's northeast.
Yeah. So this is how the house is built right onto the brook. and it has never flooded. So you see, what an opportunity for an architect to design using all of these concepts of, nature and energy.
Very beautiful house.
Yeah, I love how the brook crosses the property.
Is it hard to heat this house?
Not really.
I'm actually going to ask that because the plan shows it's almost like seasonal programming. The summer kitchen and
Yes.
the studio down below.
Exactly.
As if you would live domestically different in
Different
summer
seasons,
versus
yeah.
winter.
It's true because in the winter you live upstairs
Yeah.
and it's warmer. And for an 11-room house with 3 bathrooms, I pay about $300 a month all year for the heating, and that's not too much.
11 rooms.
Yeah. And so the house has never, it's almost as if the house found me.
In a way, it did.
And it's never been modified. And it's totally unlike any other house. If I were to sell it tomorrow, I could make a lot of money and it would be demolished within a week.
Could you tell us what this strange kind of cantilevered or wooden element?
When you go from the carport, I'll show you. See the carport? You drive down from the road in yellow, and you drive down the driveway into a carport, and then that connective element between the carport and the house is a bridge that's just floating in the air.
Amazing.
That's a force-fed garage.
I beg your pardon?
It's more than
Yeah, exactly.
And so Bowser designed those cantilevered elements. If you go forward a few,
Well, he comes from an engineering company.
yeah, okay.
I'm going to find it. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
You're going back, yeah.
There are poles that were they sort of hidden underneath that kind of pole.
Yeah, that's what
After this is
yes.
the house is over 60 years old. It's a 65-year-old house.
No, but they're very beautiful, these cantilevered elements.
Yeah, and they're built out of wood that I think he sawed off on the property. Like he chopped trees down because they're raw. They're not. They're cut by hand. So that's the living room. You see how close you are to the brook. I mean, you're just in it, really.
It's amazing.
And our furniture is all from a very big fancy house in Newark that was my great-grandparents and became a funeral home. So it's not really adapted, but I don't think that Le Corbusier would have minded.
Not at all.
But it's just remarkable
What's
how.
the apartment with the rooftop garden and the very like furniture
Yes.
in here and
Yes.
That's like
Well, you're talking about the Bestegui.
Right.
Yeah, and he was the Mexican ambassador to Paris, to France. He was very wealthy, and he was Basque, his background. And he was getting dressed up in outrageous costumes. He would dress up as Louis XIV. He would dress up as, he was a transvestite as well. He was really exotic. A new book has come out about him. And he had a huge impact on that design. It wasn't just Corp, it was the most surreal of
Well, that's what this drawing is, a Valentette.
Yes, exactly.
And in Italy too, it's like a costume ball, mask ball. So, I mean, it's just beautiful. When the trees have the leaves, you're surrounded by trees and animals everywhere, birds. Birds nest in the windows and they lay their eggs and the babies are born.
And you hear the stream all the time.
You hear the stream all the time. I don't play music.
And when it freezes, the stream is still running.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't freeze over completely, of course.
No, there's fish.
Unbelievable. Beautiful. So you really live in nature.
Yeah, please don't look at my.
I think it's charming.
But this is 1957, and just think how remarkable. And my house was designed as a vacation house, as I said, for this community of, and it's very Usonian.
Definitely. The
You know-
Usonian houses, as you may know, are Frank Lloyd Wright post-war typology.
With like poorer materials. So the floors
Less
are poor.
expensive.
Yeah, less expensive material with cork floors or linoleum or slate. And then wood paneling and plywood, not plywood, and sheetrock.
Wow, the windows have this unusual shape, or at least they look like they do from this angle.
No, they're rectilinear, but they're at an angle.
Oh, I see.
So what I intend to do, I live there alone. My mother's deceased now. And, our vision was to leave the house. I'm a historic preservation commissioner locally, so I'm going to finish the restoration that's been a bit slow this year because of COVID. And then I'm going to landmark the house and hopefully leave it as, I'm going to put it as a deed restriction that the house can never be demolished. If it's rebuilt, it has to be rebuilt exactly the way it is to the plans that I provide with the deed. I have the original plans. And I would love it to be a nonprofit for like a repository of African American locals.
That's marvelous.
Yeah. So this is me with Lucius Bowser, the brother of the architect, who is the historian and the pharmacist, and then Alan Bowser, his son, who went to Princeton. Oh, and Essex Fells magazine did this very nice.
Don't you look dandified?
I hate it because everyone said that I look just like
Karl
Karl
Lagerfeld.
Lagerfeld. Oh my god.
Well,
Oh,
no, actually, I think you're more elegant than Karl.
It's the aviators.
No, but
Distinguished.
Karl Lagerfeld was not so elegant. He was more stuffy.
Well, he worked so hard.
Yes.
I'm just there enjoying standing on the ice on my street.
Did you ever meet Karl Lagerfeld?
Yes, I did.
And did he say, you remind me of me?
No.
Like looking in
And
the
I'll
mirror.
never forget when I used to go to Studio 54 when I was 17 and 18 and 19. We used to just waltz right in, no line, nothing. And then Andy Warhol was always there. He would always sort of court my friends that have fancy names, like
Of course.
Scribner's or Getty or something like that. But
Yeah.
I have this fancy Polish name that he couldn't care less about any Polish history or anything.
Even though it's an aristocratic name.
Oh, he couldn't care
No, but he liked the other fancy names.
with lots of money. So that was nice of them to do this article I actually wrote of my house, and people in town love my house.
Frank, I just realized how much you lead a charmed life.
You never thought that?
No, I did. I did, but now that because I've never seen, no, I've always thought that. This is the third or fourth time I've invited you to Princeton, before you were talking about,
Alderos.
right, but I've never had the opportunity to see at length how charmed your life really
No,
is.
thank you. This is a drawing I did at my house. And Aldo Rossi taught me how to draw with bitumen, which is asphalt. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. This is what they call in French, une révélation. La rivelazione. You're not even sitting on a gold mine, you're sitting on a diamond. Mine is the wrong, it's incredible, the material you have.
Thank you. I feel such a responsibility to share this with all of you. And please, this is the first time I've ever presented it. So, through Dan, please contact me and, let me share it with you.
I've said enough, you talk now to him. If you have any questions.
If you're not all burnt out.
Well, you have 25 minutes, so it was perfect for the time. Do you have any questions?
Wait, sorry, what did you mean by reaching out to you and sharing that? Do you mean?
I want to share this material.
Yeah.
This is material that has been hidden for too long.
Mary,
It's like a hidden history.
this is perfect for this class.
So
It's a hidden history. It's a class about hidden history.
And I don't know if it's probably not about racism.
No, not at
I
all.
think it's about the gentlemanly demeanor of the Bowser family, who doesn't, who don't feel the need to brag or to, publicize themselves. And the fact that Edward Bowser Jr. and his wife Carmen spent the rest of their lives in Ghana creating schools. So, they weren't interested in publicizing themselves in the United States. They didn't have any
They're
reason.
not ego-driven.
I might have missed this detail, but what was their motivation to just take their roots to Ghana and just settle
I remember when I was growing up with my mother's friends that were educators, they were like African American educators that were reconnecting with Africa. I'm talking about the early 70s. So they were trying to find initiatives to, foster and support economically in Africa for education. So I think that was part of the climate then. And politically, like a lot of people in these organizations, it was like a whole sort of political and sort of cultural. My grandmother's first cousin was Congressman Peter Rodino. He was a Democrat. He was a judge of Watergate. So he sort of like, because he was a professor at Seton Hall University and they named his library Law Library, he was fostering his students who were African American. There was a lot going on there where you were really pro-Africa and pro sort of civil rights, like much more than today. Like we've really gone back.
So it's not just the Peace Corps kind of idea, which was also
No, it's hands-on. In fact, it was really funny because my mother and her friends, and they were women educators, and they were so shocked because when they finally got money together and went to Africa, to this one country for school, they were met by the president who treated them miserably.
Really?
Like, who are these women? Like, what are
Really?
women? Anyway,
Seriously.
yeah.
And so there was sexism.
Yeah. He didn't trust them because they were all women.
My word.
So,
He's really elegant. What an elegant man.
oh yes, all Bowsers.
Reminds me a little bit, although this is not the same, of Harry Belafonte. There's something about his
Possible.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at Carmen Bowser, Mrs. Bowser, who was brave to go to Paris and have a child in Paris. I mean, I've lived abroad, and
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being a woman and not having, my mother around if I was pregnant, or some kind of family member that would help me.
It's an interesting point. That's a very interesting point. I never would have thought about that. It's very interesting. James Baldwin said that he didn't feel at home until he lived in France because of the crushing racism in the United States. There's, of course, racism everywhere, but he said in Paris he could breathe.
Well, it's amazing that I grew up in Montclair, as I said, and we lived in this bubble where we felt that to be American meant to be inclusive and forward-thinking,
Right.
and fair with high ethics.
Yes.
And that's what I thought being American meant. And then when I came home after 24 years, I'd only come home maybe 2 or 3 times a year for holidays.
You mean from the lawn?
Yeah, from Italy. Yeah. And then my family would come in August and spend a month in Lusitano. But when I came home to live here, I couldn't believe how the climate had changed.
Awful.
And there was this climate of racism all around.
But racism was always there under the.
It became audacious.
It was it was a subtext, but it came back in the Trump era.
Well, you couldn't get away with it in Montclair.
I see.
You would be socially marginated.
But in Italy, there is racism. It's just different. And there's homophobia.
There's racism between the North and the South.
Yes, but there's also racism because of immigration from Africa. There's racism.
Well, I mean,
Salvini is a racist.
I saw in my family from the South, and they're
The
big landowners.
anti-immigrant, there's the anti-immigrant racism of Salvini. There is racism, but yes, you're right that before the immigrant situation, there was a North-South racism.
North-South, but I mean, Princess Sanseverino is a black woman from Cuba,
Yes.
you know, and there's no racism in the upper classes that I've seen,
Yeah, but
except for the North and the South. There's
Yes.
no like racial racism,
Yes, I understand.
only sort of like North and the South. But like my family that are big landowners in the South depend on their workers that come from Africa, you know, once a year and they come every year.
Yes.
And,
There are class divisions in the South, very strong class divisions.
oh yeah, forget about it. Forget about it. The middle class, the aristocracy and the popular class live on a parallel plane. And then there's the middle class that they don't like. With lots of money.
Funny.
I'm generalizing.
Do you have any other questions?
I was wondering, as you yourself have worked in America and in Europe, and you're speaking also about modernism in Europe and America, what struck me is a contrast in terms of materiality, which came up in the discussion. And in Europe, the material of modernity is concrete, and wood is used for. Well, the idea is that wood is the material for mountain houses or Scandinavia, so places that are a bit wider nature. Whereas a lot of American modernism is about using a traditional material, wood, and perhaps, I'm not sure about this, referring to an American vernacular, but to create a modernism with wood. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts about the differences in perceptions.
Well, I noticed that I was surprised when I went to live in Italy at the change in the construction material and the fact that there was really no wooden balloon frame, you know, sort of residential that we're so familiar with in America. It's sort of like our trademark is the balloon frame wooden American house. And, you know, maybe it comes from the cabin. Because when Newark was settled in 1664, this whole area was full of squatters that would build a wooden shack, and they would cut down trees, and the trees were used as building materials. You know, they were sent back to Newark and Elizabeth and to the cities to use as building materials. And then later on, they got the reeds from the meadowlands and they were used as lathing for plaster walls. And so everything was sort of, you know, the same type of dynamic when you're on an island. It's like you use what you have. Whereas, you know, Europe and I would say Italy has had thousands of years of construction evolution. So, you know, we were just sort of like a settlement here. So I think that the architecture in wood in America comes from its sort of settlement origins, and it's very handmade, and there was not one typological standard for construction, because you had so many immigrants coming from so many different backgrounds.
You had many different architectural cultures.
So that's, I think, how the vernacular, it was easier for it to flourish here.
Yes.
Because you had so many different, you know, sort of,
Tradition.
yeah.
But you know, when Breuer and Gropius came to the United States, the first thing that they were attracted to, and Barry Bergdahl gave a long lecture about this when he became the MoMA curator. First lecture he gave was about Breuer and Gropius on the American colonial house. They appreciated the vernacular, and it changed their practice when they came here, as we've seen. And I think Bowser is part of that. Because we were talking about, Schindler's another story. That's a different climate, that's more, and he has this complex relationship with Wright and with Olive Lowe's. It's very complex. And there's the sleeping porches of Green and Green, and it's California. That's a different thing. Well, and now we're coming full circle to the beginning of the course, which is regionalism, which we started with California.
But there is a period that Bowser, when he first comes back from Europe, it's very, very, very.
Yes, but it's amazing how quickly he went in his own direction away from Corb into something more his own language.
Mm-hmm. But
responding to Wright too.
When we see the East Orange General Hospital, it's funny, I think some of the things didn't transfer.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, he did the East Orange General
Did you have an image of it?
I did.
I don't remember it. I think maybe you had an image of that housing development. I don't think you had an image of the East.
It's funny, I have it on the PowerPoint, but it didn't.
Well, we're coming to the end now. It's
Okay.
4:19. Is there any other questions? Thank you very much. That was fabulous.